Hey, what's up? It's your boy Rawk. Don't distract me right now. My happiness is at stake here. I need to figure out which of these two games sold better. This one! Son of a bitch! I'm sorry to disappoint, but I won't be talking about Boogie in this discussion. The reason companies make video games, believe it or not, is so that they can make money off of them. You may think Activision do what they do out of the kindness of their hearts. They don't. Sure, a game can be considered successful if it receives high review scores, but I think for most companies, the dollars speak louder than our smiles. Games that sell more copies are considered more successful, so it stands to reason that if a game sells more copies than any other game released on the same system, its box art is getting framed. So why not take some time to celebrate corporate cynicism and delve into the world of the best-selling games on each of Nintendo's consoles? Now, I've discussed a console's greatest game in the past, but just because a game is the best that a system has to offer, doesn't mean it's the game that sold the most copies on that system. If that were the case, then Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 would be the best-selling GBA game. And even God was scared of that reality. The best-selling game on the NES was the birth of one of the most legendary game series of all time. Super Mario Bros. It's Super Mario Bros. What is there to say about Super Mario Bros. That hasn't already been said? Purple. I don't think that word's been used to describe this game before. You heard it here first. Super Mario Bros. Isn't the best game the NES has to offer by any stretch, but it is the reason that the NES has games in the first place. Without this game, there would be no games industry, at least in the way we know it today. There'd be no yearly releases with minimal changes. There'd be no games being rushed and releasing in unplayable states. There'd be no predatory microtransactions crammed down our throats. Super Mario Bros. Super Mario Bros. Sold over 40 million copies and was a pack-in title, bundled with most NES systems for a lot of the console's life, which is something that a lot of top-selling games have in common. But in this case, Super Mario Bros. Kind of had to be a pack-in title. And I'd argue that that positively impacted sales of the system itself, rather than the other way round. The best-selling Game Boy game was 4 games. Pokemon Red / Green / Blue / Yellow / Orange / Pink, selling an accumulative 46 million copies. The reasoning for this is pretty obvious if you ask me. The late 90s were the era of Pokemon fever, where everybody who didn't want to get bullied bought into these games and traded rats on the schoolyard. It was a global phenomenon, and with 7 different versions of the same damn game on offer, and an incentive to buy all versions in the form of exclusive Pokemon, this game had a perfect recipe for success. Although I will say, it feels a bit weird lumping Pokemon Yellow into this statistic. Yes, Pokemon Yellow is effectively just a 3rd version of Gen 1, but from my understanding, the game has some fundamental differences that make it something a bit more than the exact same game. But what do I know? If you walked up to me on the street and said Mangy, I'd think you were talking about Northern English slang, not Pokemon, and even though I'm not big on this series, I'm part of the problem. The best-selling Super Nintendo game is Super Mario World. Yeah, that's not very surprising. Don't get me wrong, the Super Nintendo has a ton of games that are more than deserving of the world's attention, but when it comes to broad appeal and accessibility, there's no topping Mario. And with Super Mario World being the series' only mainline entry on this console, it makes sense that it sold the most copies. This game was also a pack-in title for a bit there, which makes sense considering it launched alongside the SNES. And while I want to say that this was why it sold so much better than every other game on the console, 9 of the top 10 bestsellers were pack-in titles at one point or another, so that's kind of a null argument. Really? Alright, fine. The best-selling Virtual Boy game is kind of hard to determine. When the thing itself sold only 770,000 units, Nintendo probably weren't in a hurry to publish software sales, and because of that, finding any stats on how many units any Virtual Boy game sold is tricky stuff. The only thing I've been able to find is a tweet from Matt Piscatella in 2018 that claims that the best-selling Virtual Boy game is Virtual Boy Wario Land. I don't know what Matt's source for this was, and hell, it doesn't even provide an actual sales total, but seeing as it's all I've got, I'm inclined to believe it for the sake of this discussion. Now, as for a reason why Virtual Boy Wario Land would be the console's best-selling game, it's the only Virtual Boy game that's worth a damn. A full-blown, original, decent 2D platformer. If it wasn't stuck on this system, I think this game would be remembered pretty fondly nowadays. But because it is stuck on this system... What were we talking about again? The best-selling Nintendo 64 game is Super Mario 64. I'm starting to see a pattern forming here. This game sold almost 12 million copies, and I think this is pretty justified. It wasn't the first 3D platformer, but it was the first to really nail the jump to moving in a 3D space. It's kind of dated nowadays, but it was a revolutionary title that helped innovate 3D control and level design in a major way. And if it still offers a ton of fun today, imagine what it was like playing it when it released. Or remember what it was like playing it when it first released, if unlike me, you were more than a mere sperm cell at the time. Super Mario 64 was the Nintendo 64, and it paved the way for so many of the system's most beloved games. So it being the best-selling game on the console makes a lot of sense to me. The best-selling game on the Game Boy Advance was Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire. Pick one, it can't be both, that's not how being a game works. These games collectively sold over 16 million units, and unlike with all of the other games so far, I don't really have much in the way of an explanation for this. It probably just came down to the fact that these were this system's mainline Pokemon games, and that angle begins to seem more feasible when you realize Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green take the number 2 spot. But remember when I said it was weird that Pokemon Yellow was lumped into the Red and Blue statistic? It's even more weird that Pokemon Emerald isn't lumped into Ruby and Sapphires. Again, I don't really like Pokemon, but are these not basically the same thing? Is Pokemon Emerald not to Ruby and Sapphire what Pokemon Yellow was to Red and Blue? If we did lump Emerald in with Ruby and Sapphire, that would bump this sales figure up to a whopping 23 million plus. Which, granted, for 3 games, and compared to red/green/blue/yellow/indigo/brown, isn't really all that impressive. But it's still worth noting. The best-selling GameCube game is Super Smash Bros. Melee. You know, Super Smash Bros. Melee, the game that still has an active competitive community to this very day, and that every single subsequent entry in the series is compared against relentlessly, and that every mod for the series tries to make other games more like. You know, that's Super Smash Bros. Melee. This game sold 7.41 million units, and while there's definitely a massive fandom for this game now, I don't think that's what made it sell as well as it did when it was still on the market. Super Smash Bros. On the N64 was huge, yes, but I think with Melee, it was a matter of timing. This game released right in time for the GameCube's first holiday season on the market, and featured a vast amount of Nintendo characters, most of whom hadn't made the jump to this console yet. The game appealed to almost every Nintendo fan in one way or another, and with the hype of the new system's launch still very much in the air, it was a no-brainer for most people. And the game's pretty alright, which probably helped a bit. The best-selling game on the Nintendo DS is New Super Mario Bros., coming in at 30 million units. This was actually quite surprising to me. With the DS's casual focus and wealth of games that pander to the elderly, I expected something like Nintendogs or Brain Age to take the top spot. And while those games are in the top 5 bestsellers here, alongside Mario Kart DS and Pokemon Diamond and Pearl, New Super Mario Bros. Still managed to snatch up the top spot. This was the revival of the ever-popular series of 2D side-scrolling Super Mario games that hadn't been seen since Super Mario Land 2 on the Game Boy in 1992, which meant that this game worked to appeal to two major audiences. The core Nintendo fans who had wanted to see the series return for some time by that point, and the older folk who remember playing this kind of Mario game in the 80s. You combine that with the recognizability and marketability of our favourite plumber in red, and you've got yourself a game that sold better than Boogie DS.
Oh, fuck. I can't help but mention that damned hot dog man.
You'll never guess which Wii game sold the most. Okay, maybe you will. Wii Sports has sold 82 million units. There are fewer than 20 million Wii owners out there that didn't get a copy of this game whilst they owned the system. That's insanity. Wii Sports is arguably the reason that the Nintendo Wii would go on to be one of the best-selling game consoles ever released. Its emulation of real-life sports that took full advantage of the system's unique controller helped the masses fall head over heels for the thing, and the game holds up tremendously well to this day. This game was one of the single most consistent pack-in titles for the Wii, so an argument could be made that that's why this game sold as well as it did. But much like with Super Mario Bros. And the NES, I think the Wii sold as well as it did because Wii Sports was bundled in with it. People wanted a Wii in large part because of Wii Sports. So the fact that it has a lead in sales by almost 50 million units doesn't come as a huge surprise to me. The best-selling 3DS game is Mario Kart 7. I don't know what game I expected to be the bestseller on this system, but it definitely wasn't Mario Kart 7. This game just never really jumped out as the game that the most 3DS owners would have played. I thought maybe like Mario 3D Land, New Mario 2, some f***ing Pokemon thing. And while those games were all hugely successful, alongside Animal Crossing New Leaf and Super Smash Bros. For 3DS, Mario Kart 7 still managed to top all of them, with nearly 19 million copies sold. This game was a pack-in title for a good while, but so were Mario 3D Land, New Mario 2, and Animal Crossing, so I'm not sure how much that actually impacted the game's sales. While Mario Kart has never been the best-selling game on any console I've talked about so far, it has always been hovering around the top 5, so with that and Mario Kart 7 being the best-selling 3DS game, I guess it just goes to show Mario Kart sells. The poor Wii U, man. When most of the games we've talked about so far have outsold the Wii U itself, even its top-selling games aren't going to have very impressive numbers. The best-selling Wii U game was Mario Kart 8, and to me, this makes a lot of sense. The Wii U was at its best in multiplayer, and while Smash Bros. Is also a wildly popular multiplayer game on Nintendo systems, Mario Kart just has more wide audience appeal. Mario Kart 8 was what the Wii U needed, and while I have to imagine it helped sales of the console a little bit, it clearly wasn't enough for the poor thing. Mario Kart 8 was bundled in with the system throughout its life, but much like with the SNES, 9 of the top 10 bestsellers were at some point. I'd like to make some honourable mentions, specifically Nintendo Land and Splatoon. Both of these games were completely new IP, and while, yes, Nintendo Land was just a minigame collection based around a bunch of Nintendo series, both of these games managed to sell impressively well for being new franchises on a failing system. But as far as the number 1 bestseller, it's like I said, Mario Kart sells. It's like I said, Mario Kart sells. The best-selling Nintendo Switch game, as of June 2023, is Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, selling over 55 million units. What the f***? If we assume that nobody who bought the game on Wii U double-dipped, which isn't true, that means that almost 65 million people and counting have played Mario Kart 8. What's so impressive about 8 Deluxe's sales is that it wasn't even a new game. It released in 2017, and by that point, Mario Kart 8 was 3 years old, but that just didn't matter. The game sold like it was brand new, and still does to this very day. It's insanity. Honorable mention goes out to Animal Crossing New Horizons. Following Mario Kart's lead tied closely with over 42 million copies sold. I've talked about this before, but this was very much a case of right place, right time. But even if this was just a matter of circumstance, it warms my heart to see what used to be a smaller series balloon to this level of success. All we need is for Pikmin 4 to take 3rd place, and I'll be happy.
So, what did we learn about the best-selling games on all of Nintendo's consoles? Well, for starters, they're basically all Mario games. It makes sense. Mario is Nintendo's #1 cash cow after all, but it just surprised me how few other games managed to make it to the top. Like really, Wii Sports, Super Smash Bros. Melee, and Pokemon were the only non-Mario games I talked about here. Wild. But hey, just because Mario tends to have a console's best-selling game, doesn't necessarily mean that's a guarantee. On Nintendo's next console, the best-selling game could be f***ing Star Fox. I don't know. Well, now that I know every console's best-selling game, I think it's time to give myself a second chance at being happy. I just need to guess which of these two games sold better. This is bullshit!